Good evening, everyone, to our community meeting about the Granada Golf Course rain shelters. We'll just give it about 5 minutes to allow everybody to attend. We had a heavy registration for this evening's meeting, so just give us a few more minutes and we'll get started shortly. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. We are going to get started in about 1 or 2 minutes. We're going to give ample opportunity for anyone that needs to get on to be able to log in. Good evening, everyone. We are going to get started. Thank you for attending this public community input meeting for the golf course shelters at the Granada Golf Course. Before we get started, I'd just like to introduce the different members of the panel that will be here to answer questions and assist in any giving any information that you need. My name is Fred Cusero. I'm the Community Recreation Director for the city. The Granada Golf Course is operated by the Community Recreation Department. Also on the panel is Carolina Vester. She's the Assistant Director of Community Recreation. We also have Troy Hall, who is the Golf Course Superintendent, who is there. We also have Kara Katz, that's the Historic Resources Director, Assistant Director. And we also have Jose Oliveras, who heads up our CIP program. And Brandon DeCaro is the senior manager of the CIP program for all of our projects. Brooke Dannemiller, who's our assistant director of public works for landscape services. We also have Mitch Zerarian, who handles our capital projects liaison for the community recreation department. Raquel Barrieta is our labor relations director. She is in charge of our ADA compliance for the city. And we also have from our office, who is the administrator of the meeting, Sarah Espino in the CG Parks box. And we also have our designers for the designs that you're going to see today. So we have Daphne Guri from Guri Matuidi and Fabio Segre. So that is the panel. Oh, we also have Liz Ferrer, who is also part of our CIP and public works team as a project manager. All right, so what we're going to do, I'm just going to give you a little bit of a explanation of the format. We are recording this meeting. This is part of the public community input process. We started it at the beginning of the month with our website and posting of our project. We have already been receiving input from the community on the project, and this will be part of the community input process. The meeting will be recorded. We'll be able to then share the meeting on the city's webpage. So it'll be for if you have any neighbors, friends, fellow residents who were not able to attend the meeting, please let them know that they can see the meeting if they're interested in it. And they can also give us their input through an email to our Parks Project webpage. In this format, we do have a presentation that we will be explaining the project. At the end of the presentation, We will answer any questions and read out any comments that all of the participants in the meeting have. All you need to do is go to the Q&A chat box on your Zoom and type in your commentary or your questions. We have the panel that I already introduced, so we have it from all areas to answer any of the questions that you may have. Your input is important to us, and we want to make sure that we're answering all your questions and getting all of your commentary for the record. In terms of our public notice, we do have it on our Parks project page. We did distribute via door hangers within 1,500 feet of the property information on this meeting. You can see the picture there of what the door hanger looked like. We also utilized our social media outlets, our Coral Gables television. We did a public notice, and we used the city e-news to notify as much of the public as we could for this meeting and about this project. I can have the next slide, please. So the project that we are discussing today is the Granada Golf Course. This is a satellite view of the course. It is in a residential area just west of our downtown area, and very popular spot for golf. Golf is doing really well right now, so it is heavily used as a golf course. There's also a country club that is just north on Granada, and also part of that country club is the neighborhood tennis courts that are on, as the arrow is circling right there, which is also used by the country club and used for programming. I can have the next slide. Just to go over our history of the Granada Golf Course, it is one of the oldest 9-hole courses. It was constructed in 1922 by William Langford, and the course and the greens were last renovated starting in 2014, went through the year, and was reopened in November of 2015. So the course you see now was in its renovation state in November of 2015. For reference, we have put in a few of the pictures of the golf course, historic pictures that showed that the Granada Golf Course opened January 1st in 1923. It was part of the Country Club of Coral Gables Historic District, and the period of significance for all of the historical elements is 1922 through 1939. The existing conditions of the shelters that we have now, these were structures that were built after that period of 1922 to 1939. We don't have an exact date of construction. It has been noted that it may be the circa 1940s or early 1950s. We're not sure. There is no record or building plan that we could find for the shelters. Right now, we do have it as a historical resource for that design, for that period. It has exceeded its useful life, and it is a small structure. The existing square footage is 99 square feet. It's an 11 by 11 structure, and the project intent and scope is to replace these shelters with shelters that meet all of the requirements that are required for shelters today. Back up the next slide. So since the course is historic, there was a review by the Historic Preservation Board of this project to see what the appropriateness would be, because the Historic Preservation Board does have the ability for a recommendation and approval of what happens in terms of historic properties. So in August of 2020, the Historic Preservation Board, they held a public meeting. They reviewed an application for a certificate of appropriateness to construct 6 new shelters. The board found that the overall design of the shelters that we will be showing today did not destroy the integrity of the historic district, which is consistent with the Secretary of Interior's standard of rehabilitation. And in this meeting, they made the following motions. They made a motion to approve the design for the construction of 6 new golf range shelters, and they directed staff to work with the applicant to study the possibility of incorporating some sort of LED lighting, maybe solar-based, and perhaps have a trash receptacle into the design. It was a 9-0 approval. There was also a second motion, which is very important, and it was recommended that the city consider preserving one of the existing wooden rain shelters and to renovate, rehabilitate, or reconstruct as necessary and move it to an appropriate location as a historic resource. And that was also approved by a vote of 9-0. I have the next slide. So this was the initial, there was an initial concept design that was developed in 2018 as one of 8 and was reviewed by the city architect for guidance to staff on next steps. This project is unique. It's not like our normal park projects because there are a few reviews that need to be done before we even go to the public for input, because we need to have legal appropriateness for ADA. There needs to meet structural approval. It needs to go through architectural review. And this is all preliminary. It's not, none of these reviews are final because there is no permit yet. We still have to go through the public input process, and we still have to go through the process. We are basically at the spot that we are normally at for our park projects. And we'll show you the steps at the end of the presentation as to where we are in a timing standpoint. This design, we will have our designers now, Daphne and Fabio. They'll take over and they will explain how they came up with the design that is being proposed.
Thank you, Fred. And I just want to say thank you again for having us here tonight. My name is Daphne Guri. I'm founding principal of Guri Matute, and I'm here today with my partner, Jose Matute, and our project manager, Fabio Segre. And this project is very near and dear to me as well, because I grew up in North Gables. I lived on Eldorado Street and went bike riding and frequented this area throughout my entire childhood and early adulthood. So I feel very, very in touch with the project itself. If I can ask Fred or whoever is controlling the slides to go back one, because I want to start with the previous slide from AECOM. So our firm took over after the initial concept sketch had been developed. And one of the things that we were tasked with was to take this tiny little sketch here, freehand sketch, and make it into something that was practical and able to work. One of the things that we had to do was to really scale it down a lot. So as you can see in this sketch, you can see a golf court, a little golf cart right through there. And it looks like maybe 2 could fit in there. I just want to give everybody here on the call an understanding that the scheme that you're going to be looking at that we developed is actually about half the size of what's here, if not more. So we really did move in the direction to make the tiniest footprint possible so that the intervention into this existing golf course would be as minimal as possible. If you can advance to the next slide. So understanding that the sketch had already been kind of massaged and talked about at city leadership, we also took into account some of the compatibility, architectural design compatibility issues here, such as the elements of the pipe columns and the slanted fascia that you see, and of course some of the more long-lasting elements which appear in Coral Gables from the early 20s, the use of the oolitic stone, which is even shown here on the left side, in the left slide over there in right there in the circle in red. So we wanted to make sure that the design that we developed was a continuation from that sketch, and also taking into account that 2 of these shelters are going to be almost directly across from this existing Burger Bob's and the Pro Golf shop. Next slide, please. So what we did was, again, reduce the footprint as much as possible. And the idea here was to make this as transparent as possible, because what's really important about this this type of shelter is really, it's a backdrop. It's supposed to be the golf course. You come to play golf. And the purpose of the rain shelter is to provide you some protection against the rain and, most importantly, lightning protection. Now, we have already heard Fred describe that the existing shelters were not in compliance with ADA. So that was another very important aspect of the design that had to, a criteria that had to be met in the development of the design. So the elements, your architectural elements, the language, the materials, everything that we use are materials that are already found throughout the city of Coral Gables. For example, you can see the Oolitic stone on the wall. We introduced also the colored vines to be able to kind of camouflage and allow for, oops, thank you. Yeah, to allow the vines to potentially have the opportunity to even grow on top of the roof, and then kind of camouflage even the roof. We didn't, in terms of the scale, we were very careful to make this as transparent and minimal as possible. And then, of course, we introduced the Coral Gables pink on the floor. That's the slab that you see right there. We minimized as much as possible the area of the slab, only what was needed to be able to provide the ADA compliance. We provided a place for the water fountains to go on the opposite side, and plenty of spaces for people to sit down. Next slide. So in terms of comparison for between the existing shelter and the new shelter, so the existing shelter, as Fred said, is just under 100 square feet, about 99 square feet. And actually to the top of the ridge of the roof, it's about 9'2". And to the underside is about 7'1". The proposed design that we have, to the top of the roof, it's 8'6". So this proposed design is lower in height than the existing. And then the plan itself is larger, but only larger because of the functional need to be able to have a golf cart come in and transfer someone in a wheelchair safely, or to be able to walk around, to get a drink of water, or to stay there in case of a need to rest, or because of an inclement storm episode. Next slide. So this is just a close-up view in the plan, which is shown on the left. So you have a concrete bench. Some of it is covered by the roof. The other piece juts out into the grass a little bit. Then you have another cantilever bench, which is on the right side, correct? And behind that wall, the slanted wall that's faced with oolite, is the water, or the two water fountains. And again, this is just as tight as possible to be able to fit a golf cart and to be able to serve the needs, to provide the protection against a bad storm, and to have lightning protection. Next slide. The roof itself, which is shown on the lower left-hand corner, is just a simple precast roof. The materials are meant to be able to weather nicely and to provide minimal maintenance for the city of Coral Gables, which is something that all public buildings and structures need to do. To be able, these structures are designed to last hopefully 40, 50, 60 years or longer. So it's very simple to construct it, and will provide minimal impact since everything can be prefabricated offsite, it'll be very easy to transport and build this very, very efficiently with minimal disruption to the surroundings. And the rest, we kind of talked about the details here on the upper right-hand corner on the sketch, how it's similar to the detail that we saw in the Pro Shop Golf and Burger Bob's. Next slide. And these are the materials. Again, we were very, very selective, very careful in selecting materials and a color palette that would blend as much as possible with the surrounding areas. So starting with on the left side, the honeysuckle vine is the vine that's intended to grow up and over to the roof. And then here you have an example of what the drinking fountains would look like in the shelters that are going to receive drinking fountains. 4 of the 6 are intended to receive drinking fountains because those are the ones that already have water. The prefabricated bench is shown here, which is cantilevered off of the oolitic wall. And here is a sample of what the Coral Gables pink is with the rock salt finish for the floor. And then the roof of the rain shelter would be this kind of dark gray, again, to be able to weather nicely, provide minimal maintenance for the city of Coral Gables, and really serve as a backdrop. If you can visualize this kind of just disappearing as the vines start to grow above it. The precast bench where people could sit would be a lighter shade of gray, very cool, would not require any maintenance on that as well. The oolitic stone, which everyone knows is one of the predominant building materials that defines Coral Gables. And then we have the small ornamental river rocks, which are at the cluster with the tiny columns that are hidden behind the honeysuckle vine. And then a little tiny pop of color for the pipe column, kind of referencing again a historic, very, very small detail of color that just gives it like a little pop of color, complementary with the other materials, and yet subtle enough to disappear. And the Sherwin-Williams kind of taupey color is the color that we would use for the pipe column, the cluster pipe columns, which is not even visible because it's going to be hidden behind the honeysuckle vine. Next slide. And where the shelters are going to go. So the dots in red indicate the shelters that are being proposed to be replaced. And then the yellow dot just lets you have a reference as to where the Burger Bob's and Pro Shop is located. So you can see there's 2 shelters that are very close to one another and very close to the Burger Bob's. Next slide, please. And this is just a diagram that indicates which of the shelters are intended to receive drinking fountains. Next slide. And then these are diagrams of how we are placing the shelters. So some of the shelters have already been removed or demolished, or I'm not sure if they were removed recently, but some of them have already disappeared. So in this first one right here, the dotted line with the lighter shade of gray indicates the area of where the existing shelter used to be. The red kind of like movie camera is showing you the angle where the photographs are being taken below. So like photograph A is down below, which is called view A, and B, C, and D. So you can really see in view D how close the shelter is to the existing Burger Bob's and Pro Shop. So one of the things that we did was to carefully place each one of these new range shelters so that the orientation would be as close as possible to how you would come into the existing shelter. So that's how we ended up placing the shelters. They all kind of rotate a little bit, but that's because each one of the shelters had a different orientation. Next slide. This is shelter number 4, which is one of the ones that's existing. And in this case, you can see the large tree that we have A lot of the shelters have been damaged structurally because of the tree roots. So there's tripping hazards on the asphalt approach. So in this case, we actually moved over the shelter. So you can see on the diagram to the left where it says, where you have the little camera A up, if you can show the mouse right there. That's where the existing shelter is today. And where we're moving it is to the left. So we're clearing the trees. But the orientation, how you come into it, is exactly the same. Next slide. And in shelter number 5, the orientation stays almost exactly the same. So you have on the drawing on the left, you can see where the existing shelter is, and the drawing on the right, you can see how the footprint is almost in the same orientation. This is the shelter that's very close by to the backside of the tennis courts. And you can see the photos down below in view A and in view B. This is across the street. This is on Granada, across from Burger Bob's. Next slide. And this one here is shelter number 7. And this one, you can see in the diagram on the left with the little arrows, the camera view, the A and B. This is one of the ones that's existing. And to the right, you can see where we moved it a little bit away from where it was. And we also are showing that the existing hedges are going to be removed. Next slide. In shelter number 8, you can see that the orientation is almost the same as well. It's almost in the same place. And you can see the photographs at the bottom. This is the view A and B. This one is fairly close to the street. It's visible to the street. Next slide. And shelter number 9, again, you can see by comparing the diagram on the left to the diagram on the right, you can see the existing area of the asphalt approach, and we extended it a little bit more to be able to provide access to the proposed new range shelter, but it's in the same place. And in this one as well, the hedges are being removed to provide transparency. We considered a lot and worked with the city with regards to the safety. So the idea of keeping the shelters open was and free of any enclosed, anything that would provide any place for hiding, to be able to provide as much safety and security for police officers when they're patrolling, so they can have a clear view through the shelters as opposed to what you have now. So that was a big consideration, trying to maintain the shelters as clean and open as possible so that it can be as transparent so you have full visibility. Next slide, please. Back to you, Fred.
Thank you, Daphne. Just to summarize what we were discussing and what the shelter scope is and the improvements that we're doing, there is demolition of the remaining shelters. There is an intent, as I spoke about the Historic Preservation Board, to preserve one of the existing shelters and have it as a decorative structure and place it in an appropriate location. And we will work on that. The proposal of 6 new shelters, they'll replace the original wood structures that we have. This new design will improve the ADA access to allow for golf carts to drive into and park underneath, which is part of the ADA legal requirements. So we need to follow these requirements. We're looking at adding chilled drinking fountains, which I think will be a nice feature and for the new shelters. And we will look at some landscape improvements and cart extensions to each new shelter, as Daphne pointed out. Next slide. So the estimated cost and what's next. So the estimated project cost at the moment is $600,000. we are now in the review process where we have to review the proposed design with the public and with our advisory boards. So we're going through that process right now, and we're bringing it to you as a public, and we will have our Parks Project website and portal open for everyone to continue to view this presentation, to view the project, and to continue to comment. So once we get all the input and we look at the input from the community, we will make our recommendations to the city administration, and pending approval of a project, then we will start with construction and permit documents. If there's a pending of the concept of approval as is, we hope to have that completed in the winter of 2021 with permitting and bidding, and looking at construction anywhere from the end of 22 to the spring of 2023, depending on where we are with concept approvals, where we are with permitting, and Board of Architects approval. All of this has to go through the pipeline. As I stated in the beginning of the process of our presentation, those were just initial reviews by the city architect and submission into the Board of Architects. There still has to go through approval, and that's where we are right now. We're starting with the public and the advisory boards, which are made up of city residents as well, of that review of the design. Next slide. So what we're going to do now, we are going to start to read the question and answers that have been put in the chat box. If you have commentary or questions that you need answered, please, we invite you to use the chat function so we can enter them all into the records and answer any questions you may have. So Carolina, can we pull those up?
Yeah, and just to wrap up, I just want to remind everyone the public input window is through Tuesday, March 2nd. So we will continue to have our website open. The email that is on the screen, parksprojects@coralgables.com, that is also available for continuous input. So you may submit input via email. Anybody who wasn't able to join may continue to submit input through that March 2nd deadline. And as a follow-up, as Fred mentioned earlier, we're going to go ahead and use this meeting as our official minutes. So by Monday, we will go ahead and have posted this meeting and this presentation on the website, so that for the remaining 2 weeks of our public input window, anybody can still go ahead and see this presentation and virtually be part of this presentation and allow them to go ahead and comment. So with that, we'll wrap up the presentation and we'll get to our Q&A. And if you haven't had a chance to put a question in yet, please go ahead and put in your questions in the Q&A. And like Fred mentioned, we'll read them out loud. We're not going to be mentioning any of the individuals who wrote by name the question. We're putting them in a public record, what the question, what the comment is, and then we'll allow the board of attendees here to go ahead and respond. Before we go to the first question, we did receive a unique request from one of the individuals that had previously submitted their question via email. It's rather lengthy, so they didn't want to go ahead and re-enter it with the Q&A format. So we'll go ahead and read that email out loud, and then we'll go and let somebody respond. The comment reads, I appreciate the idea of advancing the community and providing safe and effective rain shelters. However, I must admit that I'm not pleased with the proposal for this project. I know that you will not please everyone, but I recommend that this project be reassessed as my conversations with residents in the area are clear. We do not recommend moving forward with these rain shelters. I find the shelter designed to have a harsh, even industrial feel. They appear to be mid-century modern design on a golf course from the 1920s. I would be more pleased with something more in tune with the heritage of the area and more similar to the ones that were there before. What would be wrong with replacing the old ones with replicas made out of coral rock, or doing like they do in the Keys when trying to give the look of wood but not use wood? There are ways to do this. Replicas of the old ones could be built, or something that does not depart as much from the style and quaintness of the old ones. The poles on the proposed shelters are stark and do not have a welcoming feel like the old ones did. The coral rock does not appear to have enough mortar between the pieces to give the depth and charm that many of the coral rock cottages in the nearby area have. Thank you. If anybody on the committee here would like to respond to this comment?
Nope.
Okay. All right. And like I said, it was a comment, not a question, so we can move forward. The next question reads, what lightning mitigation is included in the design?
I can answer that question. On the roof, we'll have the lightning protection, which is typically two little lightning rods, which are maybe 12 inches high. They're very small and barely noticeable. That's what the lightning protection will entail, something that's on the roof. Thank you.
Thank you. The design is beautiful, but can we talk about functionality? Apologies. We need shelters that will protect golfers from horizontal rain, seating for 4 golfers, room to protect pull carts, and protection from rain driven by a 25 miles per hour wind. Don't really need protection from motorized golf carts. They are designed to protect the occupants.
In terms of the motorized golf carts, as we've talked about, it is an ADA requirement. It is a federal legal requirement that the cart be able to pass through it. So that's why it's designed in such a manner. In terms of horizontal rain, you know, the flat roof is a little larger than the footprint underneath, as described by our designers. So there is sort of an awning effect, so it won't be straight up and down rain. And in terms of horizontal rain, short of having walls, maybe the designers can answer that in terms of horizontal rain.
Sure. There's a balance that the project needs to do. It has to provide transparency and safety, which includes allowing to have as much visibility through the rain shelter. So we're designing for that standard. And the number one priority isn't so much the rain as it is lightning protection. So in the development of the design, it was talked about and the balance was tipping towards more the safety and security of the residents of Coral Gables to leave this as open as possible. Thank you.
And also for the ADA, Raquel, if you have an opportunity to explain why the previous shelters, obviously they did not meet ADA, but why as we rebuild these shelters, they are required to meet ADA? Raquel?
I think Raquel's having.
Here we go. Okay. We'll try to get back to that topic and we'll move on with the next question.
One other thing, the new shelter, the proposed shelter has a larger roof square footage, so it provides more additional rain protection than the existing ones. And it also has a one wall in the middle. So if it is coming from any direction, the wall could also be used. So the proposed structures provide more rain and lightning protection than the existing structures. So that should be noted.
Thank you, Brooke. The next question reads, if the period of significant... Raquel?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, so 2010 accessibility ADA standards require that there'll be enough space for a golf cart, as Fred had said, to be able to enter if someone is seeking shelter. And so it has to be at least 60 inches by 96 inches. So that's why the old shelters would not have been ADA legal under the current ADA standards. And that's why you see the current design as it is now. And if that answers your question, Carolina.
Thank you so much. All right, we'll move on to the next question. If the period of significance of the architecture of the historic district is 1923 through 1939, why is the proposed design based upon the rear awning of a building built in 1953?
I do think in the presentation, when we talked about the period of, it was the period of historic significance for that golf course. I don't know if it was for the architecture. I think Kara is with us. She could maybe
I am.
expand on that.
Sure. So the period of significance established for a historic district is to identify the properties within it that are either considered contributing or non-contributing. And they provide sort of the architectural rationale for the creation of a historic district. They're not meant to provide or establish any design guidelines for the district. They're just meant to identify which of the properties in the district are considered contributing historic resources. And the reason why I believe that Fred mentioned it earlier was just to clarify that the existing structures were constructed outside of the period of significance or not considered contributing resources. So.
Thank you, Kara. The next question reads, why have shelters close to the clubhouse? We will run inside if we are that close. It is nice to have one by the first tee to offer protection to the starter, but we don't need one by the 9th green. Can we move that one out on the course where it is really needed?
The first thing to look at with placing it on the 9th hole is running to the clubhouse from the 9th hole does entail crossing Granada in the rain, which is a sometimes busy street. And so from a safety standpoint, we have to look at that as well. We did look at it. We think that the locations that we've placed it in provide the best possible protection for everyone that's using the course. And that is why we chose those. Granada still splits the course, even though it's close to the pro shop. You still have a busy street you have to cross in the rain.
Isn't it tee number 5, not green number 9? It's right next to the tennis courts, and tee number 5, I believe, is the more.
They're right next to each other.
I would also like to note that sometimes there are players who play after, the round starts, the pro shop closes, and then you're out on the course and you're not able to make it back on time before the pro shop closes. And it often takes, and I'm not a golfer, but I've heard it takes about 30 to an hour. And if you're on the other half of the course, you're not going to make it back while the pro shop is still open.
Yes, a 9-hole round of golf is usually anywhere from an hour and 45 to 2 hours or 2 hours and 15 if you're not the greatest of players, especially at this course. So yes, we do close the pro shop and they're still golfing out there. That is correct.
All right, next question. Was this project reviewed by the Board of Architects?
Jose or Brandon, would you like to answer that one?
Well, we submitted it to the Board of Architects, almost this exact presentation. And the city architect, who's no longer with the city, unfortunately, which is why he's not part of this presentation, elected to approve it administratively. This happened last summer, primarily because the board wasn't meeting at the time because of the COVID situation. It would have to go back to the Board of Architects, the final design. We did submit it to the historic board, who did review it, as Kara mentioned, but it was only administratively approved by the Board of Architects.
Thank you, Brandon. Next comment is, please refer to the golf holes where the shelters are going. Would you like me to pull up the map again?
Yes, please.
Whoop. I'm sorry. Here, let's do this. So, I have my Zoom window blocking, sorry. Here we go. So as based on the comment, just to reiterate the proposed shelter locations, shelter 1 is right outside of the pro shop area. This shelter does have access to water and electricity. That's why it will be identified as one of those that has the option of having a chilled water fountain. The same for shelter 4. That's right off of Coral Way here. Then we have shelter 5, which has also access to water and electricity, which is right off of Granada Boulevard. We'll have shelter 7 that also has access to water and utilities. That'll have the chilled water fountain, shelter 8, and then shelter 9. Originally, there were 9 complete shelters. Of the 9, due to budget, due to size, and to interference with the actual playing, we've reduced the 9 to 6 as a conceptual idea.
So to specifically answer the question, which is the holes which they're located, I think like, so shelter number 1 is by T number 1. Shelter number 4 is by T number 3. Shelter number 5 is by T number 5. Shelter number 7 is by T number 7. Shelter number 8 is by T number 8, and shelter number 9 is by T number 9. So I think that's what the person was asking. Hopefully that answers.
Thank you, Brooke. And we'll go back to the questions. Okay. Next question, why remove hedges when they give protection to the shelter occupants from horizontal rain? This is functionally self-defeating.
Well, one of the issues with the shelters, with the hedges, is that it does not provide a visible sight line for police and security that goes around the course, our neighborhood safety aides and our police department. So one of the things that we've done with a lot of our park designs is look at designs that have a sight line that goes through. So the shelters do not encourage people being there after hours, places to hide, places to congregate when the golf course is closed.
Thank you. The next comment is about the project cost. Almost $100,000 per shelter. Seems like an extraordinary cost per square foot. Why so expensive?
Fred, if you like, I can answer that.
Yes, please.
Yeah, the budget includes design fees and also includes a contingency for unforeseen conditions. By the end of the day, we're going to go through a competitive bid process. So we're going to have contractors bidding and competing against each other. And so we're going to get the best price in the market. Thank you.
Thank you, Jose. Next comment reads, thank you for having this meeting. Did the architects take into account the Coral Gables Best Practices Manual in developing the proposed design of the rain shelters?
Yes.
Thank you, Daphne. Next comment reads, where did the shelter design come from? How is it in line with the golf course period of significance of 1920s and 30s? Is it too late to have a new design proposals? When are the next meetings and board meetings for review of this project?
So I can answer in terms of the review of the project. We're in the review period now. As I stated in the process, based on the input, we will look at it. We will discuss it with the city administration and determine what the next steps are. At that point, if it is determined based on the input to look at new design proposals or look at alterations or changing the design, that will be our city administration will make that decision. We have had that happen in the past. So in terms of the question, is it too late? No, it's not too late. We're in the beginning of the input process, which is what this input process is here for, is to get the community input and see how we move forward, in which way, form. In terms of the design, I don't know if Daphne or Fabio want to answer on that, on the design.
Well, I think the initial design came, like we explained earlier on the presentation, came from a loose sketch concept idea that was developed by ACOM as one of 8. ACOM was the original company that worked on the renovation of the course as a whole. And then those designs floated through the Office of the City Architect and City Planner. And they guided staff, which is present here now, as to the direction to take. So this is where then Guri Matuti was hired by the city to look at this initial concept design and work from there to make it functional and safe and meet all the requirements that the city has to adhere to.
I don't have anything more to add to that, Carolina. Thank you.
You're welcome. I think there's one more comment in this comment, which refers to the period of significance, and Kara can restate that, but it's my understanding that there were no shelters during that period. So they did not have, or were not required to
Right. So the period of significance doesn't establish design guidelines for a district. It just establishes what properties that are within that district are contributing and non-contributing. So one of the standards actually that historic preservation has to follow is Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation. And one of them is that new interventions should be distinguishable from the old. And in this case, the Historic Preservation Board found that these clearly are distinguishable from the period of significance and those contributing resources found within the district.
Thank you, Kara. And just to reiterate what Fred said with the project input, our process in Parks and Recreation has been that once the public input window closes, the same individuals here in this meeting, we review all the commentary received through the meeting, received through any of the social media outlets, received through mail notice to the city clerk's office, received via email notice. We compile all those comments, and our director, Fred Kucera, formulates a memo with all that commentary, which then gets moved up to the city manager's office for review. And then we'll formulate from there if we need to, relook at the initial concept and go back out to the community.
And the shelters, that's a continuation of the renovation project that started about 7 years ago. So when that project took place, that's when we made sure we had sleeves for water and things like that. So this is not just popping up now. This has been ongoing for almost 7 years now to get to this point. And it's just the phasing of the renovations. That's just where it's fallen.
All right. We're moving on to the next comment. All golfers are supposed to be off the course when the pro shop closes.
Understood. I will tell you that in talking with our pro shop, that doesn't necessarily occur.
Okay. Next comment. How many of you have actually played golf on the course, other than the great Troy Hall? So Troy's actually on the call. He's our golf and park superintendent. So kudos, Troy. But I have not played golf.
I have. Used to play it every Friday back in the day when I was allowed to. So
I have played a bad game, but yes, I have played.
Me as well.
But you have a few people that have frequented the golf course.
I think I'll need to do some research.
Yeah.
Next comment. The pro shop building was built in 1953 according to the presentation. The homes in the historic district are from 1920s and 1930s. Why not use a design compatible with the architecture of the homes, not 1953?
I think I already answered this a couple times, but anyway, just to reiterate that there are a couple different approaches you can take with historic properties. You can either try to match and be subtly different, or you can be clearly differentiated between the old and the new. And in this case, the option was just chosen to do something that's clearly identifiable as a new intervention on the golf course.
Thank you, Kara. The next comment reads, we oppose lights because it will create an attractive nuisance. We live across from the course and do not want the course to become a nightly gathering place.
Thank you. Understood.
Next comment. Why didn't you have public meetings before this went to the Historic Preservation Board? Were renderings sent to neighbors before this meeting?
They were not. We followed the process. As we stated, if we go to the community and we have a design that is not approved by the Historic Preservation Board, then we don't even have a basis to start. At least we have a basis that the Historic Preservation has looked at it, because it is a historic course. Doesn't mean that we can't go to looking at different designs, but the process that we have for public input is, we do, as we explained, we open the website. We do have a month-long process. We make sure we inform everyone. We'll record the meeting. So we're given ample opportunity for input. That's the answer.
And normally we also allow for modifications. So we have to show something. So this is a concept design. So with input, with any of our projects, this is the opportunity where hopefully we don't have to restart from the beginning, but where we do look at alterations, options, improvements, changes based on the input that we receive from the community, material changes, functionality changes, etc. The next comment reads, the biggest safety issue at the golf course is pedestrian safety. There are bikers, joggers, and walkers all flowing into the street with cars driving in both directions, routinely going 30 to 40 miles per hour. This is because of the small sidewalks and threat of being hit by a ball when walking the golf course. What are the plans to improve the safety for pedestrians?
So we have looked at what would be, looking at a walking path around the golf course, and through public input, we decided not to pursue that project. There's a sidewalk across the street. It is a golf course. We do try to inform pedestrians that it's a golf course. So as people walk around the course, if they choose to, there are people playing golf. So that is something that is an inherent risk as people walk around the course, that golf balls will be in the area. So, there is a sidewalk across the street, but in terms of on the course, there are no plans right now for a walkway. That was, as Brooke mentioned, 7 years ago when we started a phased renovation project that looked at the improvement of the course and further renovations. That was one of the projects that was discussed, and that was not approved. But
the improvements that have been done since that public meeting was held was the installation of a sidewalk from Toledo going towards Coral Way. That section there was added, and then at most of the intersections, high emphasis crosswalks have been added, the zebra stripes, and some sidewalk extensions too, to make the outside loop on the other side of the street safer, so that pedestrians have a safer place to walk on the outside part of the golf course. So those are improvements that have been made since those initial public meetings before we started the renovation 6-7 years ago.
Thank you, Brooke. Next comment reads, may I suggest that you all drive around the course in golf carts on a very rainy, windy day. See if you still like the design and positioning of the shelters. Looks like another research project.
We will.
And I'm sure Troy, if he's still on the call, he does this daily. The next comment reads.
Yes, I'm still on the call, Caroline. And yes, I drive around. And yes, the wind blows and the rain comes from all directions.
And it's important to note, again, that the shelter's main function, even though it's to be a shelter of rain and sun as well, the main function is lightning protection. Next comment reads, thanks very much for holding this meeting. It has been most informative. Thank you. And we have one more comment, unless anybody wants to go ahead and add more comments, but it looks like we're wrapping it up. The last comment reads, can you give residents the option of several different designs? Where are the residents that want a mid-century design? It can be differentiated from the old, but to be more in line with the 1920s and 1930s theme.
We will definitely look at that. That is something to consider. If we have to go in that route based on the input that we get, we will definitely look at adding new designs and seeing what we do. I do think it is difficult though to have 3 or more designs that are vetted for all the different legal requirements and going through all the design. It becomes an extensive thing to do that, but we can look at the second part of that question, which was looking at something more in line with 20s and 30s, if that's what is the consensus from our public input.
Okay. So that was the last of our questions. We
So,
have not had another one.
Yeah, it appears that we don't have any more. Thank you.
Oh, wait, I take it back. There was one more request to have one of the email ones read out loud. So this was another email comment that we had received, and they requested that we put this in the public entry with this meeting. My 2 cents. Why is the city spending money on new designs when they could follow a green strategy and restore and repurpose the historical 1940s shelter that for 80 years have complemented the landmark golf course? Residents love them. They have a nostalgic effect. Brooklyn's Prospect Park repurposed, restored its vintage shelters. Why can't the city begin to think green? Adopt a sustainability initiative should be exercised.
Well, as we went through the presentation, there are some facets of it that don't allow for, they don't meet the structural R code, they don't meet ADA. So it was difficult for us to allow them to keep under the same design and the same scope and the same locations that they are.
Thank you, Fred. We had actually one more comment come in on the chat. So I'll go ahead and read that. Have you considered crosswalk signals at the Greenway Granada intersections, a blinking yellow light to slow down cars, a 15 miles per hour speed limit, speed bumps to slow down cars around the course? The fact of the matter is far more people use the course for walking and exercising than for golf.
And we'll pass this along to our traffic folks at Public Works. I know that particularly the North Greenway and Granada intersection has been looked at, and I think it may be under review with the county or something with the county, but we'll check on the status of that, those intersections. But I know it's something that Public Works has been looking at since over the last couple of years.
Oh, one more came in. They want to keep us here. When are the next meetings and board meetings?
Well, as we go through this input process, based on the input that we get, we will look at whether we need to schedule additional meetings. As we stated, the board meetings were had. So we will look at, if we need to have further meetings, we will inform the public much as we did with this process, and we'll move forward with the same type of process.
Thank you, Fred. And that's it.
And if one thing to add, for anyone that wants to know what the next steps are at the end of if you want to let us know with your email, and we will email everyone that asked of what the process is and where we stand after our review process of the public input period. We will give you all the information and where we go for the next step. We have no problem sharing all the information with you as we move through this process and being as transparent as possible.
And like we mentioned earlier, we will go ahead and, as soon as this meeting is over, reformat this video and should have it posted by Monday on our portal on the website for public input. So if you can go ahead and share any neighbors, any friends weren't able to attend this meeting, this video will go ahead and be a recording accessible to anybody on the city website. All right. And for public commentary, again, the website is, the email address is parksprojects@coralgables.com. And the deadline that we mentioned earlier is through March 2nd to go ahead and provide us with any public commentary on this proposal of design. All right. So we have no more comments. I think it's important to thank everybody who took the time out of their evening to inform the public of the many facets of this project. It's not just a simple design. It's something that a lot of the staff behind the scenes worked on to make safe, to comply with code, to comply with the regulations, to comply with historic. So we really thank everybody who attended tonight's meeting, especially our group of architects. So we had all four. I saw Nadine joined us a little bit later. So we really appreciate all four of you guys joining us this evening to explain to the public where you guys came from the original concept and brought it to life in this presentation.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.